Now earlier we alluded to a situation like this, where I have a negative x equals a 4. Well, that's not my solution. I need my solution in terms of x, not in negative x. So how do we deal with that? Well, the first thing we need to realize is that this negative in front of it, that represents a negative 1. So when the coefficient is missing, it's understood to be a 1. So now what do? Well, we can multiply both sides by a number that we're going to choose to be negative 1. I guess we didn't really choose that because we know a negative 1 times a negative 1 produces a positive 1. So this becomes a positive 1x equals, on the right side, 4 times a negative 1 makes a negative 4. And then since 1s are understood, if it was just an x, I'll leave it as just an x in simplified form, so x equals negative 4. So don't worry about when you see an original problem in this situation. We can still solve it and find out what x equals. But you need to understand that seeing it in this form, that is not reduced. It is not solved. Another example that we can look at. Minus x equals negative 7. Same type of ideal. Doesn't matter there's negatives on both sides. What matters beginning is that my variable is not isolated. There's a coefficient of a negative 1 in front of it. And I don't want a negative 1, I want a positive 1. So again, we can multiply both sides by a negative 1. Negative 1 times negative 1 produces a positive 1. And then negative 7 times a negative 1 produces a positive 7. So I'm left with x equals 7. Some of you might be also notice that if I look back and I have negative x equals negative 7, and you're going, Willie, wait a minute. You multiplied both sides by a negative 1. Can't I just divide both sides by a negative 1? Well, what do you mean? You mean something like this? Absolutely, because multiplication and division are very similar. Negative x divided by a negative 1 produces a positive x. And then negative 7 divided by negative 1 produces a positive 7. So we can do it both ways. And what's cool about algebra, it doesn't matter what you do as long as you do it to both sides. Of course, there might be ways that will get there quicker, but as long as you don't disobey that rule, you're going to get there eventually. And with practice, you're going to be able to take shorter steps to get to that solution.